So we already know that Augustine is really important in the early church and that a lot of his ideas become doctrine. He's really influential in the use of the term sacrament, and for Augustine, a sacrament is an outward sign, so that's the ritual, but it points to an inner reality. And we can use there the image of a smoke being the sign of a fire. The smoke is what we might see first, but it's only there because of the inner reality of the fire. Now, a sacrament for Augustine forms a bridge between God and us. It is a way of God directly acting in our lives to change us. So for Augustine, and therefore for the Catholic Church, and in many ways for the Orthodox Church, sacraments are more than signs. They not only signify or point to something, they actually sanctify as well. And by sanctify we mean make holy. So it actually changes something in the person that is undertaking the rite. As an additional point of interest, but this really is extra, so you can skip it if you like, because it's a bit technical and historical. But there was an interesting question around who it was that was causing the grace in the early church. So in the Diocletian persecution, there were ministers who collaborated with the Romans. Now, if you want more details of this, just click on the link below this video on the Moodle page. But during this period, Christians were basically forced to give up their faith because it was illegal to be Christian anywhere in the Roman Empire. To prove that you had recanted your faith, you would hand over scriptures if you were a priest, and if you were a priest or a common person, you would be asked to declare that you did not believe in Jesus, and usually asked to perform a sacrifice to a Roman god, or to prove that you were worshipping a Roman god. Now, during this period of persecution, some ministers were called traitors, and this was because they were prepared to give over their scriptures to the Romans to make it look as if they'd given up Christianity, but there was collaboration going on between them. So the local Roman governor wouldn't persecute them any further if they made it look as if they were no longer Christian. Now, some Christians known as Donatists, who were named after a bishop from the period, they said that if a traitor then carried out rituals, they must be invalid because the person who'd done the blessing had been a collaborator and a traitor. Now, Augustine objected to this and said the sacraments don't really rest upon a human agent. It's really about the divine agent. It's about Christ's presence being there. And this is a bit of a contrast between what's known as ex opere oppantis, on account of the work of the one who works, so that's the priest. Is it down to what the priest does, or is it ex opere operato, which is on account of the work which is done, which is the work of God, Jesus passing on grace. And as we say, Augustine basically argued that it was God's direct influence that caused the grace here, that the actions of the priest were less significant. Having been reminded of what we mean by a sacrament, because that's really important to understand what's coming up next, we'll just have a quick look at the 4 basic positions in this controversy, although there are 6 models that we're going to have a look at. So the first one is the official view of the Catholic Church, transubstantiation. And that's the idea that Jesus is biologically or materially, substantially present in the bread and wine, that literally is somehow, through the grace of God, the body of Christ and the blood of Christ. All Catholic thinkers agree that some change occurs. These views that are coming up next are rejected by the Church as heresy, but there are thinkers who say that yes, the bread and wine genuinely do change, but it's in terms of purpose or significance, rather than the material itself changing. One way to make sense of this is to think of something like a wedding ring. Now, before a wedding ring becomes a wedding ring, it's just a band of gold. The substance is gold, it's one of the elements, Au, and that's all really it is. It has no meaning or purpose until it's bought, then used in a service. Now, at that point, the substance stays exactly the same, but the meaning of what that ring is does change. Its purpose changes, its significance changes. It becomes more than just the gold that we know it's made of. So that's one way of understanding what these thinkers are getting at with their idea of transfinalisation and transsignification. Now, Protestant thinkers don't really think that the substance changes. For all Protestant thinkers, the bread and wine is bread and wine. However, for Luther, somehow Jesus really is present too. So we have the bread and wine, and then alongside that, we also have the body and blood of Christ. For other Protestants, including Zwingli, the Eucharist really is only a symbol. So that remains bread and wine. The bread is bread, the wine is wine, but it in some sense represents or takes on the power of Jesus. But in no literal sense can we say that this is the body of Christ. So we have 6 models, and they're helpfully summarised here in a diagram that you'll find on the front cover of your workbook. What you need to do is read through the workbook and textbook pages for each of the 6 models. Now they come up next in the workbook. It's pages 9, 10, 11, 12 and 13. And they are almost the entirety of the textbook pages that you'll find at the top of this Moodle page. In your workbook you've got space to summarise each of the theories. What you're then going to do is come back to page 8 and produce a visual summary of the 4 main ideas behind the 6 models. So as we say, use this image here and recognise that the top left-hand box is transubstantiation. The top right-hand box is what we see underneath it in this diagram. It's for consubstantiation. And then down at the bottom, you can have 2 models in each of those boxes. The ones that we currently see here on the top row, transsignification and transfinalisation, are going to go in the bottom left box, and then memorialism and virtualism in the bottom right box. Try and do this visually the way that it's done in the diagram here. So you can see in each case at the top you have the same image of the bread and the wine, and then we see what it is that changes into or becomes when it is blessed. This task is probably going to take you about an hour to an hour and a half to do properly. When you've done that, you can take a picture of your summary on page 8 and send it on to me. You could post it onto Instagram unless you think that's the lamest idea in the world. But what I'd like you to do is bring that all together in a diagram, and as ever, drop me an email if you've got any questions or queries.